Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Challenge Success Fall Conference, Parent Education Evening. We're so glad you're here. My name is Margaret Dunlap. I'm the School Program Director for Challenge Success. We're really glad to have our schools here, our parents, and our community members here tonight. I'm just here to share a few logistics. Number one, importantly, we do have an interactive piece later on in the evening which necessitates you pull out your cell phones and go ahead and text in 22333 and then identify yourself per your role. Make sure you do that and hold tight, put your phones on silent, and we'll be pulling those out a little bit later in the program. So we're going to get started right away with a video from a Challenge Success School in Monte Vista.
I think Monte Vista students define success based on GPA and SAT score.
Mainly grades or money.
Fulfilling your parents' expectations.
Getting good grades, getting in higher level classes, taking APs.
What college you get into and the prestige of that college.
How well you can perform compared to your classmates or your peers. Of course, there's a couple of groups of students on campus that will also focus on other things like maybe sports.
Generally doing well in school.
So that they can go to some college with a really good name even if they don't actually truly want to go to that college. And I think too often Monte Vista kids are too obsessed with the numbers and the outcome and the label.
I personally don't agree with it. I think success means doing whatever you think you want to do in life.
Sure, you have to do well in school and you have to get a good occupation when you grow up and be able to provide for a family. But I wouldn't put that all on grades.
Grades definitely aren't the only thing that are important to me. One of the major things is telling myself that I can do something and then actually succeeding in it. So essentially, well done is better than well said.
I think some success can be defined by seeing who you have as friends, what your outside of school experiences are.
Personally, I define success based on my friends' approval.
Learning and making sure that I understand the source material.
Trying hard and studying hard.
You achieve success when you achieve more sleep.
Making yourself happy.
Just being happy with my high school experience as a whole.
Doing the best you can in stuff that you actually enjoy.
Exceeding my parents' requirements, which is extremely hard to do.
The people you're around.
When you're just happy and you don't really care about anything else.
Hi, welcome to our 12th annual Challenge Success Conference. My name is Denise Pope. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Education here at Stanford and co-founder of Challenge Success. And I'm thrilled to be here tonight with all of you and with all the folks watching us via live stream too. So welcome, welcome. Standing next to me is my co-founder, Dr. Madeline Levine. And in our audience, we've got co-founder Jim Lobdell, who's going to just wave right now. So thank you, Jim. But before I turn things over to Madeline, I want to take a few minutes to let you know what we've been up to this year. It's been a very busy and exciting year for Challenge Success. First, as you saw from the student-made video from Monte Vista High, we continue to work with our school teams from all over the globe to make changes in policies and practices in order to provide kids with the academic, social, and emotional skills they need to succeed now and in the future. And the clip represents one way the Monte Vista students are beginning a dialogue at their school. The film is one small step toward challenging our society's very narrow notion of success and helping kids recognize that success isn't defined by what you heard them say, grades and test scores and college admission. And in fact, success isn't measured at the end of a semester or when a kid turns 18. But that real success is much broader and is achieved over the course of an entire lifetime. And we're excited to continue our work with Monte Vista and the 30 other schools that are here tonight. These are teams of students and teachers and parents and administrators who will be joining us for a full day of workshops tomorrow to develop plans to implement research-based practices and policies for more engaged and healthy kids. This year we have amazing teams from the Bay Area, from Los Angeles, from Washington, from Arizona, from Alabama, and from as far away as Doha across the globe. I think it took them 2 days to get here. So let's hear from all of our school teams out there with a big round of applause. We are so excited to work with all of you, and we know it's going to be a great conference. Our very first conference was in 2004. Can't believe it. We've worked with over 130 school teams and have impacted over 800,000 students, parents, and educators, trying to spread our message about a healthier version of success, a message about well-being and real engagement with learning. And we've learned a lot over the past 12 years, and at the urging of those who worked closely with us, we've decided to try to disseminate our work even more broadly. So we've done a few things. This year, we recorded some of our most popular parent education workshops so that more schools and communities can benefit from interactive exercises and lessons on raising a well-balanced student, on how to handle everyday parenting decisions around homework and media use and extracurricular activities. So if you want to bring effective parent education to your school community this year, have your PTA send us an email and we can help. Some of you may have seen the new book that's out that Maureen Brown and Sarah Miles and I wrote called Overloaded and Underprepared: Strategies for Stronger Schools and Healthy, Successful Kids. It's a book of case studies of real schools that we've worked with and a guide to best practices so that even more schools and families can benefit from what we've learned over the past decade. And all of the author proceeds go directly to Challenge Success. The title phrase, overloaded and underprepared, is actually what led us to tonight's theme, sparking creativity, imagining tomorrow's schools. It seems pretty clear to anyone with kids, and I have 3 of them, you have 3, now they're adults, that they are overloaded and overscheduled with homework and extracurricular activities, running from one activity to the next, with very little time for thoughtful reflection and very little time for sleep. And that this overload is wreaking havoc on their bodies and also their psyches. And the irony, that's the overloaded part, the underprepared part, the irony is that many of these busy kids are emerging from their high school years woefully underprepared for the world they will face. All of the studying and memorizing and test prepping and resume building isn't actually providing them with the skills they need to succeed in life. Tonight, we're going to take a hard look at the system and how it may be impeding the very skills our kids need most. Skills like resilience, self-regulation and communication, collaboration, and with a focus tonight, adaptability and creativity. We'll spend some time with Tony and Madeline and our student speakers discussing how parents and schools can help to develop a generation of real problem solvers and innovators who are more prepared for the complexity of what the future may hold. Our presenting sponsor, Millennium School, is one of the new progressive middle schools in San Francisco that is doing just this. The very first line on their website reads, "We believe in a broader definition of success." I think you know why we are friends with Millennium. School can be more than a place to get knowledge alone. It's also a place to build the skills and mindsets for a happy, purposeful life. Millennium is designing a new school model based on developmental science to realize the personal and academic potential of middle school. I'm personally very excited to be talking about Millennium because I've been working closely with the amazing and dynamic leaders of the school as they design a highly innovative, hands-on, and interdisciplinary curriculum that aims to inspire and truly prepare their students. We are so grateful for Millennium's sponsorship of the conference this year and wish them the best of luck as they begin admitting new 6th graders for next year, so check them out. We also want to thank our lead sponsor, Ted Dintersmith, who is a passionate advocate for improving education and believes in reimagining schools to truly prepare our kids for the future. Ted worked with our keynote speaker, Tony Wagner, to produce a new film and to co-author a book with the same title called Most Likely to Succeed: Preparing Our Kids for the Innovation Era. You're going to hear much more about the movie and the book and see a little clip from Tony later tonight, and we want to thank Ted for his continued support of our mission. We're also really excited to announce that a generous donor stepped up to offer a $75,000 challenge grant tonight to help meet our budget needs for the rest of the year. I know, surprise. This means that every gift that comes in, no matter what size, 5, 10, 15, bigger, will be matched dollar for dollar up to $75,000. While we have a great relationship with Stanford University, we actually don't receive funding from them, and we rely on the generosity of folks like you to meet our budget needs. Thanks for considering a donation tonight, especially since it will have double impact due to this challenge. Finally, I want to take a moment to thank our amazing staff members, our Executive Director, Maureen Brown. You can raise your hand when I call on you. Our Schools Program Director in the back, Margaret Dunlap, who helped to put this whole thing together. And Samantha, Sarah, Emery, Sunny, Tim, Ben, all of our coaches in the audience tonight, and our tireless volunteers that help make this conference a success each year. A very special thank you to our board members, especially Board Chair Charlene Margot, and all of our board and advisory members here in the audience. You can find all their names on our website, but we literally would not be here without the wisdom and support of all of these people. So let's give a big round of applause. I'm done with the thank yous. So without further ado, I want to turn things over to Madeline. Madeline is a nationally known clinical psychologist. She's the best-selling author of several books, including Price of Privilege and Teach Your Children Well. She's a co-founder of Challenge Success with Jim and I, and most importantly, wife and mother of 3 adult sons. And she's going to help get tonight's conversation started. Take it away.
I'm not the wife of my 3 sons.
No, I know, that came out wrong. She is a wife and a mother of 3 sons.
Thank you.
Go for it.
Okay, hi. So, while this is an educational event about creativity, I want to talk about something a little different first, and that's about anxiety. And the reason I want to talk about anxiety is because I know everybody in this audience is actually anxious. Actually, if you're not anxious, raise your hand. That's not, we got 1% of the audience is not, that's good. And here's how I know that you're anxious. Because yesterday when I was seeing patients, I saw a kid whose parents had been MIT graduates. And they were very bright and very concerned about their son, who was a straight A student, and his progress. And this is a true story because I think I've said before, when you're a psychologist, you don't really have to make up anything. You just wait for crazy to come to you, and it does. It really does. So they come in with the kid who's having problems with anxiety, and I ask them to describe their day, and their day is totally built around this kid's success. But the nuttiest thing they do is every evening after dinner, Dad gets out a stopwatch and sits next to his son with a stopwatch to graph his increased efficiency. He's not actually graphing whether he's getting it right or wrong. He wants him to be able to move more quickly and then get more of his stuff right. Now, to me, that's nuts. I mean, just think about sitting there and having somebody with a stopwatch every night. So what's he doing in my office? Well, the kid has an anxiety disorder, duh. And while it's kind of out on the bell curve as an example, more and more and more of the kids I'm seeing have parents who are absolutely terrified about what outcomes are going to be for their kids within this really narrow metric-based way of looking at success. And I think that it's interesting that both the military and corporations in America have a better understanding of what kids are going to need going forward. So the military in 1990 at the War College coined a term VUCA. And VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And they're doing a tremendous amount of re-education, reprogramming, replanning, restructuring around these ideas that not everything is siloed, that not everything is looked at from above. And how do I think this would translate for your kids? Well, one thing is, I think the days of one right answer are pretty much over. And it certainly isn't what you want to be doing with your kids. So for example, at the dinner table, a really good idea is to have family conversations about some political, anything that interests you. Last night with my kids, it happened to be about marijuana, but that was fine because it's an opportunity to listen respectfully, to hear another point of view, to make your kid have a better understanding of how an argument is constructed. And I think that classrooms need to integrate much more of this. And I think for those of you who have heard me speak before, you know, I often talked about having 3 very different kids, right? I talked about my analytic kid, my creative kid, and my hands-on kid. And my creative kid hated that because his point always was if he was creative, he couldn't be the smart kid. And when I went on the Katie show, he said, if you say that on national television, I'm going to out you, right? I'm going to just walk out and out you. And because Tony's here speaking about creativity, I've been giving this a lot of thought. And I think that myself, like most people, have a very, or had, I'm working on a very narrow notion of creativity, like creativity as artists or thinking outside the box or that kind, like my kid in theater, he's creative. And I realized that creativity, there's kind of an everyday I don't know what to call it, everyday creativity, ordinary creativity, creativity in all of us. And so I looked up the research and found that creativity is one of the antidotes to this VUCA world. And that's the world we're in, by the way. So, you know, it's the flat world, it's the global world, it's things changing very, very quickly. And kids who are creative actually are more adaptable, they're more flexible, they're less likely to be thrown off balance when they're faced with challenge. And it helped me, me personally, Tony, to stop thinking about creativity as what I'm calling now small c, like that kind of creativity. And so I said to my son Michael, before I came here, my creative child, I said, you know, I'm working on a new idea of creativity, but I really don't understand where you got your creativity from. He does Broadway, and he does that. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, you don't know where I got my creativity from, you know, eyeball to eyeball. It's like, don't you write books? And I never thought of that as a creative pursuit. And it is, because you take a blank page and you make something of it. So I'd encourage you all to see if you can expand your idea of what creativity is, to lessen your attachment to these kinds of narrow metric-based things, certainly in ways that are crazy. Do I have another minute? Because this is my mother here.
You have 1 minute.
I have 1 minute. Thank you. Because I think what's happening to kids, as long as we stay anxious like this and don't honor things like creativity and recognize the VUCA world, is I think every developmental stage is being given short shrift. So I think we treat toddlers like babies, right? We fight, they're having a fight in the playpen or the sandbox, and we intervene. We intervene, it means we're not giving them the opportunity to learn self-control, which is what 4 or 5-year-old kids have to learn, because they're going to have to sit in school the following year. And we do the same thing all the way along the line, so that, it's my last story, so that I'm standing in the post office this morning, the big post office, and there are 2 kids right in front of me. And they're about the ages of my sons, which, you know, I sort of like that. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, oh, we're applying to law school. And I'm okay, great, I have a kid in law school. And then they take their application and they hand the application to the clerk behind the counter. No, it's a true story. And she's like, what do you want me to do? And they're like, oh, I'm applying to law school. And she's like, where's the envelope? And they don't have an envelope. They think she's going to put it in for them. So there's a 22-year-old acting like, I don't know, 9, something like that. So I think that we have kids, I think we have a great optimistic group of kids. I don't think our kids are all in trouble, but I think they're young. I think they're young because there's 24 hours in a day, and we're looking over and over and over again at one aspect of their development. We need to be looking at their whole development. Thank you. Nice job.
That was good. So you got to hear from Madeline, and now you're going to get to hear from Tony Wagner. Tony Wagner currently serves as an expert in residence at Harvard University's new Innovation Lab. Prior to this appointment, Tony was the first Innovation Education Fellow at the Technology and Entrepreneurship Center at Harvard and the founder and co-director of the Change Leadership Group at the Harvard Graduate School of Education for more than a decade. This is a mover and a shaker. He started out 12 years as a high school teacher. He is, I know he's embarrassed, but I wanted to brag about him. He was a K-8 principal. He was a university professor in teacher education. And for those of you who know this organization, I didn't know this, he was the founding executive director of Educators for Social Responsibility. If you don't know it, it is still alive and well today, and it's a fabulous organization to go and look up if you're an educator and you want to teach kids about social responsibility and getting along and changing the world.
Doesn't it have a different name now?
No.
Same name? My
Trust
mistake.
me, I did my work, Madeline.
Excuse
All right.
me?
Tony is also a published author. He's published a ton of articles and 6 books. I mentioned his latest book, Most Likely to Succeed, Preparing Our Kids for the Innovation Era, co-authored with Ted Dintersmith. And then his earlier book, Creating Innovators, The Making of Young People Who Will Change the World, has now been translated into 12 languages. Along with the Most Likely to Succeed movie, where he was the strategic education advisor, Tony also collaborated on this fabulous 60-minute documentary called The Finland Phenomenon, which if you haven't seen that, you should definitely see. So you're in for a treat. We're very excited to welcome to the stage Tony Wagner.
That was horrible.
Oh
Don't do
God.
that. You were wonderful. You were so. I love watching you. Wow. Between these two, I don't have anything left to say. I'm embarrassed and overwhelmed a little bit. But, you know, I'm such a huge fan of Madeline's and Denise's and a fan of the work of the Challenge Success. It's a particular pleasure for me to be here this evening. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And I'm going to try to be fairly brief because I'm really looking forward to the interactive part of the evening, as I bet you are too. But this topic of creativity, I think, is incredibly important. And I want to start by exploring very briefly 2 fundamental myths about creativity. Myth number 1. Well, creativity is only for some people, gifted. Creativity is something you're born with. Creativity is something that very few of us have. But you know that's not true, don't you? Anyone who's studied child development or spent time in the company of young children knows that's not true. The average 4-year-old asks 100 questions a day. And believe me, that's a creative act. Ask a good question. And almost every kindergartner thinks of himself or herself as an artist. I was watching my 2 grandchildren just 2 weeks ago, 4 and 6, an hour and a half at a table, just coloring and crayoning. And not just kind of simple stuff, but complex forms and colors. It was stunning. But the sad thing is that by the time those children are 10 or 12, most children stop asking questions and worry about getting the right answers. And almost none of them think of themselves as artists, unlike those kindergartners. So that's myth 1. Myth 1, fundamentally, you know better. You know that we are born curious, creative, imaginative. That is the human DNA, until it's either schooled or parented out of us. Now, there are different forms of creativity, as Madeline alluded to. We don't need to get into that now, but we need to understand that is the human DNA until it's disrupted. Now, what about myth 2? Well, myth 2 is, well, creativity, that's a nice to have. That's nice for a couple of you over here. But that's not something we all need. This is something that's really important. It's entertaining, it's amusing, but important? You bet it's important. Many still think we live in the knowledge economy, the knowledge era. That was a term coined by Peter Drucker in 1959. We don't live in a knowledge economy anymore. Knowledge has become a commodity, growing exponentially, changing constantly on every internet-connected device. In fact, the world no longer cares what our kids know. That's a commodity. No competitive advantage in knowing more than the person next to you, because they're going to Google it and learn it just in time. No, what the world cares about is not what they know, but what they can do with what they know. That is a completely different and brand new education problem. Because we now live in the innovation era. So what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you a couple of things that it means. Because the world no longer cares how much our kids know, a growing number of companies are increasingly suspect when they're handed a transcript. Transcripts don't tell them very much anymore. Even transcripts from name brand colleges. So down the road, you know this story perhaps, Google used to be famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, for only hiring kids from Ivy League schools, and they only interviewed the kids with the highest test scores and GPAs. That's where all our anxiety comes from. Well, along comes Laszlo Bock. Being a good Googler, he analyzes the data and discovers that these indices are, quote, worthless, unquote. His words, not mine. He goes on to say the skills you need to succeed in a competitive academic environment bear absolutely no relationship to the skills you need to succeed in the era of innovation. Right now, today, you go on Google's job site, word college doesn't appear. 15% of the new hires don't have a degree at all. They're using structured interviews to make important hiring and promotion decisions. What are they looking for? Evidence of leadership, evidence of teamwork, evidence that students have grappled with a complex analytic problem, evidence that students have learned through trial and error and learned how to make mistakes and learn from them. How do we prepare kids for that? Oh, but you're thinking, well, that's just Google. I mean, you know, there's some crazy people out here on this coast. So they keep telling me. I was in Ho Chi Minh City a year and a half ago at the invitation of Deloitte, an accounting and consulting firm. Going to speak to area business leaders and had lunch with the CEO of Deloitte. And she quite spontaneously sort of offered this point of view. She said, you know, we used to hire the best students from our best schools, but we don't do that anymore, she told me. Turns out they don't work out so well, she said. What do we do now? She said, we look for good students and we put them through a summer-long boot camp to see how they solve problems collaboratively. I believe that the era of conventional credentials as the primary competitive advantage in the hiring process is fast disappearing. Disappearing in favor of a different world that wants to see clear evidence of competencies, not false credentials. And I believe that we already see clear evidence of a very serious fallout. Recent college graduates, 4-year college graduates, do you know what the current, and I'm worried now that I'm going to increase the anxiety in the room, Madeline, with this, the current and underemployment rate of most recent 4-year college graduates? Anybody want to guess? It's over 50%. And what do we mean by underemployed? Well, I'll tell you. We have BA-ristas. We have BA bartenders. We have BA students with an average of $30,000 of debt, not earning a college graduate wage, which, by the way, has declined consistently over the last decade. Starting college graduate wage, $36,000 a year. Now you look at the average debt of $30,000 and average starting salary of $36,000. You think back, some of us who are older in this room, how very, very different it was when we went to college. So how do we then prepare kids for this new world, this innovation era? What is innovation? And what do we have to do differently as parents and educators? These are the questions I've been exploring and have continued to explore in recent years in my work. First of all, there are two kinds of innovation, as I've learned it. First of all, there's innovation that brings entirely new possibilities to life. And that's fairly rare. That's a sort of combination of particular time and place and special talent. Think like a Steve Jobs. And that may be more a matter of nature than nurture. But then there's the other kind of innovation that's at least as important. And that is creative problem solving. What is Google's 2-word answer for whom they're trying to hire? Smart creatives. You can be a problem solver without creativity. You're not going very far in the innovation era. Conversely, you can be creative but not have any real experience in applying that, and you're not going to be able to add the same kind of value. So how do we develop the capabilities of many, many, many more of our young people to be creative problem solvers? Well, to try to figure that out, I interviewed a wide variety of young people in their 20s, all of whom were creative problem solvers, but in very different domains. Some were in science, engineering, technology, some in the arts, some social entrepreneurs. Excuse me. Some were from privilege, some were from poverty. But I wanted to try to understand what had most influenced them or shaped them to be the creative problem solvers that they were and that they are still today. So, of course, I interviewed their parents to see if I could discern patterns of parenting. Asked them about their education. That led to one of my first troubling discoveries. Some of these kids had gone to some of our supposedly best schools, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon. They all told me they had become creative problem solvers in spite of their schooling, not because of it. Troubling discovery number one. But I explored it further. I pressed them. I said, come on, there's got to have been something in your education. Help me, I'm a recovering high school English teacher. Wasn't there anything? And sure enough, when I pressed them, they could all name at least one teacher who'd made a real difference in their lives, rarely more than one or two. So I interviewed all of those teachers. And that led to my second very surprising and troubling discovery. In every single case, the teachers who'd made the greatest difference in the lives of these young innovators were themselves outliers, teaching in ways that were fundamentally different than their peers, yet remarkably similar to one another, I discovered. Then I spent time hanging out in those few schools that really do a great job of teaching creative problem-solving skills. And it didn't take me long, because frankly, there aren't very many. But I went to the MIT Media Lab. I went to the brand new Olin College of Engineering, also in Massachusetts. I came out here to the D School. I went to High Tech High, to New Tech High, to Expeditionary Learning Schools, to the Bing Nursery School, just down the street here. And I saw a remarkable pattern. And all across all of those schools, Montessori schools, Reggio Emilia schools, I saw a remarkable pattern of learning and teaching that was completely consistent with how my outlier teachers were teaching. And so what I came to understand is that our system of schooling, which is a century old, it was created and was designed for the dawn of the industrial era, is fundamentally and radically at odds with the kind of schooling that develops the capacities for creative problem solving. 5 fundamental contradictions I'm going to briefly touch on. Contradiction number 1. Conventional schools are all about celebrating and rewarding and measuring individual achievement, like that stopwatch. Problem is, innovation is a team sport. There is no innovation without deep collaboration. Knowing this, these teachers created accountable team projects, and they team taught whenever they could. Why team taught? Because these teachers had come to understand that isolation is the enemy of improvement. Isolation is the enemy of innovation. Contradiction number 2 is all about, in conventional schools, how we compartmentalize knowledge and we favor specialization. Well, there's a place for that. But innovation happens at the boundaries of academic disciplines, never within them. Knowing this, these teachers built interdisciplinary projects around a real problem that needed understanding and solving, or a big question that could not be adequately answered without using multiple disciplines, like the challenge, say, of climate change. Contradiction number 3 is about the environment, the culture of the classrooms. Culture of so many classrooms I walk in, and particularly at the high school and college level, is a culture of passivity, a culture of infantilization. Because there's only one expert in the room, and that's the one at the front doing all the talking. Radically different when you walk into a culture where the challenge is to teach creative problem solving. Because there, the teacher sees his or her job as that of a coach, coaching students to a higher performance standard and empowering them to engage and to make a real difference in the work. Content knowledge matters, but it's learned in the process of solving a real problem or answering a big question. Contradictions 4 and 5, I think, are the most challenging of all, most troubling for me as I look in schools. Contradiction 4, you see, is all about the F word in schools? No, not that one. Failure. Failure is the worst thing that can happen to you in school. Various forms of failure, Madeline and others will tell you, is the #1 nightmare of Americans, adult Americans. Fear of failure creates a culture of compliance in schools, a culture of risk aversion, and as much for the adults and the teachers as it is for the kids. We teachers are afraid of failing in front of our kids or our parents or our peers. Here's the problem. Innovation demands that you fail early and fail often. There is no innovation without trial and error. I went to IDEO down the road here. They told me their company motto is fail early and fail often. That's where I learned that. Other companies talk about failing fast, failing forward, failing cheap, but failing. Heck of a way to run a company. Oh, this failing's going on. Somebody at the D school, a teacher at the D school said to me, yeah, we're thinking F is the new A. Now, I don't recommend taking that back to your schools just yet. It needs a little kind of finessing, but you know, it all came into relief for me when I talked to a young woman at the Olin College of Engineering. She said, you know, we don't talk about GPAs, we don't fret about grades and stuff here. She said, but we obsess about iteration. Iteration, my new favorite word. Iteration means moving from 1.0 to 2.0. Iteration at a school level means reflecting on your work, what went well, what didn't, what lessons did you learn from that project or that class, and applying it to the next one. So the teachers in these schools that taught creative problem solving assess students according to a body of work, looking for evidence of progress over time. And they frequently graded on some different kind of scale. I will tell you, there are only 3 grades that I can justify as a teacher: A, B, or incomplete. Raise your hands if you want to fly with a C- airline pilot. Raise your hands. How about a D+ dentist? Ever had one of those? Look, in the adult world, you're either not yet there, you're proficient, or occasionally there is real human excellence, but it's rare. Why should it be any different in school? These pluses and minuses, these points of percentages of GPAs that people obsess about, it's a form of lunacy. And guess who gets loony by it? Our students, as these folks know and have documented. Lastly, I want to talk about the final contradiction, and it's about motivation. We rely, I think, far, far too heavily on extrinsic incentives to motivate learning. Carrots and sticks, fear of failure being #1. But what I discovered when I interviewed these young people, again, from both privilege and poverty, was that they were far, far more intrinsically motivated, wanting to make a difference more than they wanted to make a lot of money, wanting to do work worth doing in school, not for the A, but because it was interesting work. So I went back and tried to reanalyze all of that parent interview data to try to understand, what have these parents done, what have these teachers done as well to stimulate and reinforce this intrinsic motivation. So striking. And I, in fact, found what was for me my 3rd discovery. In every single case, both parents and teachers had explicitly encouraged 3 things: play, passion, and purpose. Parents encouraged much more exploratory play, fewer toys, toys without batteries, sand, clay, paint, blocks, and then, of course, Legos. Teachers trying to bring the spirit of play into the classroom with the kinds of assignments they gave. It was Ed Carrier, who teaches engineering just down the street here at Stanford, who talked about bringing an element of whimsy into every assignment he gave his students. I love that word, whimsy, especially coming from an engineering teacher. I'm betraying my bias as a recovering high school English teacher, no doubt. But you know, what was so interesting, as I talked to these parents, I came to understand that they were really careful observers of their children as they played. And to the extent that they were able, they encouraged them to try new things, to explore new possibilities, because these parents believed that it was more important for a young person to find and pursue a real interest that might become a passion that it was merely to achieve academically for its own sake. You know, there's a lot of talk about grit, perseverance, and tenacity and how important it is. It's increasingly clear that it's more important than IQ for adult well-being. Where do you get grit? Where do you get it? Well, I don't think you get it best from a tiger mom sitting on your shoulders telling you to practice for 10,000 hours. No, I think it comes in the pursuit of a real interest, in the pursuit of a passion. Now, let me, first of all, reduce a little bit of the anxiety here. Whenever I say that, I have all kinds of folks say to me, yeah, but I haven't found my passion yet. I don't know what it is. I understand that. There's a sequence here. You start by being curious. You start by asking questions. Curiosity leads to interests. Interests explored ultimately can become passions. So these teachers and parents encouraged this kind of exploration and development of real interests because they knew how important it was for intrinsic motivation. But what was fascinating was that in every case, as the kids grew older, their interests and passions morphed, they evolved. But in every case, they deepened to a deeper sense of purpose. And that's because both parents and teachers had instilled one simple idea, one simple moral viewpoint. The idea being that we are not here on this earth just to serve ourselves. We have some responsibility to give back and to make a difference, even if only in a small way. So let me just suggest three takeaways, three ideas, at least from how I think about what I learned from this work. So much of our schooling focuses on the acquisition of content that can be often more quickly and easily acquired by other means. Let's be clear, this is not skills versus content. Content matters for lots of reasons. You know, a few years ago, when some high school kids heard that the Russians invaded Georgia, they said, oh my God, South Carolina's gonna be next. They were missing a little content there. Actually, probably not. It probably had been studied to death in school, but it had never stuck because it was no context. But so content matters. But here in this world, skills matter more and motivation matters most. So the first takeaway for me as a teacher or as a parent is to really try to critically assess my lessons or the lessons my children are taking, units of study, from those three perspectives. What content is he or she expected to learn? How important does it seem? Are they going to remember it 6 months or a year later? If they're not, then why is it being taught? Secondly, how is content being used to develop skills? And let's talk about the 4 C's: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creative problem solving. Skills matter more than content. And most important, how are my child's motivations for learning being stimulated, nurtured? Is my child being encouraged to ask good questions, to stay curious? Motivation matters most for this simple reason. If you are self-motivated, you will continuously acquire new content knowledge and new skills all your life, which indeed is a requirement for living in the innovation era. So that's number one. Number two, in schools, we need to encourage educational R&D, research and development. You know, here's the deal. Microsoft's R&D budget is about 17%. Google's well over 20%. Even a manufacturing company like 3M has a 6% R&D budget. Well, what's our school's R&D budgets? Yeah, right. They don't have one. You know, so I meet people like Jeff and Chris from Millennium Schools, and they're talking about creating a different kind of school that can be a laboratory, that can be a real research and development facility. And there are a number of other schools out here like that. And I think we need to see them in a different light. They're investing in creating models for the future. But we don't have to wait for them to do that. In all of our schools, we ought to take a portion of our professional development money and call it an innovation fund to which teams of teachers can apply. Why teams of teachers? Isolation is the enemy of improvement. Teams of teachers will iterate far more quickly, take more risks than will individuals. But we specify what kinds of innovations we're looking for. I want to see every school every student have a digital portfolio that follows them through school. I want to see students graduate on the basis of exhibitions of mastery, where they present and defend work from their portfolios, where a diploma is not a certificate of seat time served, but is a certificate of mastery. That's the kind of R&D we need. We need interdisciplinary courses that help young people understand the world as it is, not as it is artificially compartmentalized. So we need R&D. That's lesson 2. Lesson 3, a simple one. I take a page from Google. How many of you know about Google time? Raise your hands. You must. You all live here. Guess not. All right, so you go to work for Google. You have permission to play on company time, equivalent of a day a week, or so I'm told. What if? And by the way, they do that because they and other companies like 3M has been doing it for 40 years, have found that giving people time to work on projects that are of particular interest to them is a major accelerant of innovation. Post-it notes. How many use Post-it notes? Raise your hands. We all do, right? Came from an engineer who was given time to fool around with a lousy glue that didn't work. It sort of worked, but not very well. He came up with an idea, and we're all the better for it. So what if? What if we said to every student who started school, you're going to have a certain percentage of your time where you are the architect of your own learning? Google time. Not free time. It's time for you to ask the questions you want to ask, to get more deeply into something that interests you. Maybe it's a period at the end of the school week. Maybe it's a mini-mester between semesters. It can be done lots of different ways. I'm getting a growing number of emails from teachers who are trying this out. Stunned at the results. I got an email from a high school teacher, said, I've made every Friday Google Day. And the thing that astounded me, he said, was that the kids in the front of the classroom didn't know what to do. You know, those are all the kids who raised their hands, right? Kids in the back of the room went crazy. They had all kinds of things they wanted to do with the time. The ones who are all quiet, you know, never goofing off and all that. Fifth grade teacher emailed me a few weeks ago trying this out at an independent school. She said, I suggested that kids, I'm not going to give you any more academic homework for weekends. None. Instead, it's going to be your Google time. She explained the concept. They came back on Monday reporting what they'd done. So one kid had cooked a whole new series of recipes that he'd been dying to try. Another one spent the entire weekend looking at videos, trying to learn how to play a guitar. A young woman sort of researched her Chinese ancestry, about which she knew nothing. She was stunned at how alive the room had become with curious, engaged kids. Folks, we can do this. The folks at Challenge Success have pointed the directions. You are here because you know we need to be doing something different. I think these kinds of things that I see happening now around the country are the beginning of fundamental change. Thank you. Denise mentioned Ted Denson-Smith is the executive producer and the visionary behind a documentary film on which I worked as well, called Most Likely to Succeed. It's been shown, I think, a couple of times here in the Palo Alto area, and I think it's coming up again next week at a school. At any rate, go to MLTS, Most Likely to Succeed Film, MLTSFILM.org, and you can sign up and learn how you can show the film in your neighborhood, your community, your school. But this is a 5-minute excerpt, and I like to show it because it really kind of gives an evidence for the kind of education we're talking about. This is not hypothetical. It's not theory. It's going on in 500 deeper learning schools and going on in Ed Leader 21 schools. It's going on as a bottoms-up initiative. So I want to show this film just to begin to give you a flavor for the kind of learning we're talking about. Now, please show the film.
The philosophy of High Tech High is founded largely on the idea of kids making, doing, building, shaping, and inventing stuff. The engineers that I know, the architects I know, the artists I know, the great educators that I know, the entrepreneurs that I know, are all sort of perplexed and curious about how they can do it better the next time. And that type of perplexity leads to engagement, it leads to learning, it leads to innovation. We are trying to have that type of perplexity and curiosity get inculcated in our students in everyday practices.
In both Linkabit and Qualcomm, one of our problems was being able to hire enough qualified people, enough trained people. And so it was kind of a long-term view to set up high-tech high.
Oh, I don't think it's that the glue worked. I think I know what's wrong. And
like if you have tooth spacing and 0.01, the gears won't connect at all.
We didn't know that it was all going to work until maybe 4 weeks before exhibition, 3 weeks.
I mean, we knew that pieces of it were working, right? And even those pieces were impressive.
We had to learn about civilizations, the Mayans, the Romans, and the Greeks. And Scott and Mike didn't want to just teach us this, so they came up with this big wheel, which is a big gear, which has a lot of drawings on it, and it's connected to all these other mechanisms, and they each represented our theory. So, I learned about the Mayans, the Greeks, and the Romans, and I really based my theory off of the Romans.
And why so?
Because it has to do with expanding. They were always expanding, and what I realized is that they were expanding not because, not just for the fun of it, but they needed resources for all the people back home, Italy and all the ones that they, all the new places that they took over.
Then they had to, on their own, develop and defend an idea on why they think civilizations rise and fall.
So we had to create like a flow chart just explaining what our theory was, and then we got critiques on it, and then we created a group one.
Another piece is on the mechanical side. They need to take what's already an abstract concept with their theory, and they have to take that and actually physically manifest it. They have some very preliminary metrics they need to use. They know that there's going to be a big wheel turning at a certain RPM. They know how many teeth that is, so they have basically a box to work within, some bounds to work within, and they have to make everything.
Yeah, I can get one.
Oh, I put the wrong side in. Oh my god.
So we have an exhibition that we're preparing for right now, and it'll be tomorrow night, and there will be thousands of people here looking at student work, students presenting their work, visitors looking at the work, students presenting their work to each other. And I think that idea of making work public, that's a missing piece to me in schools in general.
For most of you, this is probably the biggest project that you've ever exhibited. A lot of you, it's the first project that you've ever really had a public exhibition of. All right? Cool. We're going to be here. If you need to go, we understand, but we're going to keep working for a few hours. Break.
This idea of sort of making something and having a public exhibition and having people come look at it. And you have that feeling that we all have, like, how did they do that?
You really need to understand it, and you really need to understand why you need to know this to be able to complete the project.
What astounded me was that while doing research, my theory, it actually fit with a lot of these civilizations. It wasn't just like some random theory.
When kids have that feeling, it's transformative for them. I made this, and everyone's coming to look at it.
You like that? The documentary is way, way better. And again, you can go to mltsfilm.org to sign up for updates and to learn how you can show it in your local community. Thank you all very, very much. Pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Tony. I think from that little clip and from Tony's talk, you can see that we are about engaging kids. And one of the things that's really important at Challenge Success is student voice and student choice. And what we require of every team is that at least 2 students come and they're part of it. They're working, they're making, they're tinkering to try and make their school better and to be a part of the action planning process. And we've got a bunch of kids in the audience, and what we do every year is we ask 2 students to speak about their experiences at Challenge Success, either working with us or working as part of a team. So we have 2 fabulous students for you tonight. I'm going to introduce both of them, and they're going to come up one at a time. So the first student is Caesar Chavrin. He's a recent graduate of Irvington High School, and he worked with Challenge Success not as part of a school team, but for his senior benchmark project on academic stress in adolescence. And we're going to hear from him in a second. And then afterwards, we're going to hear from Niharika Kadavakolanu. Niharika is a senior at Monte Vista High School in Cupertino. That's the school that made the movie. And she loves to volunteer in her community, especially helping autistic children. She's passionate about cognitive science. And she co-founded the Challenge Success Club at her school and is a student rep on the Monte Vista Challenge Success team, which is working with us again this year. So big round of applause. We're going to start out with Caesar.
There are a lot of you. You know, before starting, Margaret Dunlap told me I could mess up 100 times and you guys would still be rooting for me. So thank you. So, as a recent high school graduate, I admit that academic stress and concerns of being successful is real. Stress caused by AP classes, sports, clubs, homeworks, and peers is not an exaggeration. In my senior year of high school, we were assigned to study a social issue affecting our community. I chose to work on academic stress on adolescents. We had to research our social issue extensively, and through research, I found that academic stress can cause a variety of symptoms, such as sleep deprivation, anxiety, depression, a weaker immune system, and a poorer cognitive health. My inspiration to choose the social issue of academic stress was mainly due to my firsthand experience with friends. I constantly witnessed my classmates experience symptoms of fatigue, anxiety, and depression on my typical school day. In fact, my closest friends shared with me they had been diagnosed with depression, they had taken drugs to soothe anxiety, and they had developed other health symptoms such as stomach ulcers due to stress. I then wondered of the depth of the problem in my school. If my best friends were experiencing those symptoms, then who else was too? I therefore sought an organization that was willing to not only acknowledge, but also fight the issue of academic stress. And that's when I contacted Challenge Success. With the help of Margaret Dunlap, I was able to have empirical answers of the severity of stress levels amongst my peers in high school. I conducted a survey in my high school about sleep. The results were astonishing. For example, we found that in my high school, the average amount of hours slept was 6.5 hours. The recommended is 9. And the average time spent on homework, it hovered over 3 hours daily. Ultimately, I was able to present the effects of academic stress and the severity of the problem to the teachers of my school, including those in charge of the social issues project. I'm proud to say that since working on the social issue, my school has made a solid attempt at reducing academic stress. It was not uncommon for our vice principal to come into senior classes with a desire to hear the students' voices in the matter of stress. And he would take note of any change we felt was necessary. Thus, inspired by the Challenge Success and the change I started to see in school, I wrote an advocacy letter to the California Superintendent of Public Instruction in hopes that the message of reducing academic stress would spread further. Although academic stress is still a continuous problem in my school and city, I was lucky enough to work with Challenge Success and encounter an organization who truly does have a feel of modern issues in the modern day of education. Challenge Success is working with school communication to reduce stress. But what sets them apart from other organizations is that it puts the voice of the student first. I would like to thank them for having me, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions afterwards. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Challenge success. When I first heard those two words, I wasn't quite sure what they meant. However, after this past year, I've come to truly understand the meaning and depth behind those words. It's not easy being a teen today. We want to excel in our studies and pursue the activities we love, but on top of all that, we have this pressure, this immense pressure to succeed. But what exactly defines success? Doing what we love, picking ourselves up after we have fallen, doing the best that we can? There's so many different meanings and paths that lead to success, yet there seems to be only one that's filled up the minds of many students today. Get the best GPA, the highest test scores, and get into the top colleges. This mindset was prevalent for so many students at my school. We were losing sleep for our grades and quitting activities we love just to spend that extra time studying for our SATs or for our AP classes. My peers were so stressed because of this misconception that success only stems from getting into the top university. So when I discovered that my school participated in a program called Challenge Success, that challenges the notion of success and aims to reduce academic stress on campuses, I was eager to become involved because I wanted to find a way to alleviate stress. With the team of students, teachers, parents, and the principal, we made our campus more supportive of student well-being and engagement with learning. The first change we made was implementing conflict calendars. The calendars were posted in each classroom so students could inform teachers when they have tests or assignments from other classes. This way, teachers would be aware of conflicting schedules and have the option of scheduling their tests differently. The conflict calendar has really helped reduce student stress and has increased communication between students and teachers. Our biggest endeavor was creating a campus-wide event called Optimal Learning Experience Day, or OLE Day, dedicated to creating a more relaxed environment around campus. Teachers participated in the classroom by teaching engaging lessons with a fun spin, including games that challenge students' logical reasoning skills. Teachers and staff also participated in activities during lunch with the students, such as yoga, Zumba, and a therapy dog station. My favorite was seeing my teachers dance it out at the Zumba. The day was a huge success. OLE Day encouraged students to de-emphasize perfect scores and focus more on enjoying the learning process. But more than just providing fun activities, I wanted to emphasize the main goal of the Challenge Success mission, redefining the notion of success. So with another student on our team, I created the Monta Vista Challenge Success Club to increase student participation in the program. The club would serve as a platform for students to voice their ideas on changes they wanted to see and would foster discussion on the different pathways to individual success. We would bring speakers and share unconventional paths to success so that students could learn from those who have achieved accomplishments with or without perfect grades, scores, or educational opportunities. The club, OLE Day, and the conflict calendars are just some small ways that my school has worked towards the Challenge Success mission. Now we are looking forward to doing something more large scale as we explore more opportunities to reduce stress at our school. Challenge Success gave us the inspiration and vision to push us in the right direction to create positive change in our school, our community, and in our homes. Being able to impact my community as a student has been especially rewarding, and I encourage the students here to take this opportunity to lead and make a difference. Thank you.
Big round of applause again for both wonderful student speakers. Before we start our interactive discussion, I want to just tie some things together. I think in your head you can see the connection between what Madeline started out by talking about anxiety. Tony starts out by saying it doesn't have to be this way in education. And two students saying, hey, we already are starting to make a difference in our school. People are anxious, people are stressed because of this very narrow definition of success that Tony tells us isn't actually working in the world today and certainly isn't going to work in the future. And one of the things that we take very seriously at Challenge Success, as you see, is student voice, but also the voice of the community. And what we're going to do in this interactive panel is ask you to actually weigh in on some everyday questions. And we're using creativity as the theme, but the larger theme is this broader notion of what are the skills we truly want our kids to leave with. As parents and as teachers, what is it that we want to instill? And it's the creativity with the big C, I guess, as Madeline would say. So what I want you to do now is take out your cell phones. And if you haven't texted your role, this is what we want you to do. You want to text 22333. If you're a student, you're going to text CS student. Watch the autocorrect here because it's a little tricky with these cell phones, okay? So 22333, if you're a student, you're going to text CS student. If you're a parent, you're going to text CS parent. And if you're an educator, you're going to text CS educator. And we're going to ask you questions and we're going to poll the audience and have you weigh in. And then we're going to see your answers in real time, not yours individually. We're going to see collective answers in real time. All right. Scenario number one, are you ready? I want you to answer the question, do you consider yourself a creative person? Be honest. I want you to answer the question, do you consider yourself a creative person? This is what you're going to do. Next slide. You're going to text, yes, I do, if the answer is yes. No, I don't. You don't need the little hyphen. If the answer is no, you don't need the quote marks. Just yes, I do, or no, I don't, or I'm not sure, if you're not sure. I'm going to say it again. Do you consider yourself a creative person? So you're going to text in, yes, I do, no, I don't, no apostrophe, or I'm not sure. And we'll give you some time to do that. Okay, so you can see up above the results. So the pink is yes, I do. The blue is no, I don't. And the green is I'm not sure. So the educators, yay educators, more educators believe that they are creative people, followed closely by parents. Fewer students, but most of this audience, and I think that you guys were convincing, believes that they are creative. We do have a larger chunk of I'm not sures. About 25% of the students are I'm not sure. Okay, so before we discuss that, we're actually going to go to the next question. So remember the answers to this one, and we're going to go to the next question, then we're going to talk about them both at the same time. Okay, based on everything you've heard tonight and everything you know, everything you do in your work, in your school world, do you honestly think creativity can be taught in school? Do you honestly think creativity can be taught in school? That's the question. If you think it's yes, you are going to text yes taught. That's YESTAUGHT. It won't let us just let you put yes, so this is why we have to come up with these creative things. Okay, if it's no, then it's no taught. No taught, NOTAUGHT. And if it's I'm not sure, you're going to just type in HMMM. HMMM. Okay, so the question is, do you honestly think creativity can be taught in school? Watch the autocorrect. Yes taught, no taught, I'm not sure. Look at, we have a bunch of optimists here, right? So the educators, 85% are saying yes. You know, we didn't ask them how. We just asked them, do you honestly think it can be done? The parents, 80%. The kids are less sure. And that's interesting. So we're going to actually have a little conversation about that. Can everyone see? So 50% of the students say yes. Then we've got some that say no. And that's another quarter that they say they're not sure. So, thoughts? You know what, let me ask the students how they would answer first, okay?
Good idea.
How would you guys actually answer those questions?
Well, okay, it's on.
Yeah, they watch you, and then when you talk, they turn the mic on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would actually consider myself not to be a creative person, and I'm going to be with the majority and say I'm not a creative person, and as well as, do I think it can be taught? I'm not sure, to be honest. Because the way this generation has been more educated, I've seen that like creativity has never been really that stressed in my education. And we've been more built on a test regime. And well, I do think it can be taught, but I've never experienced it. So I'm not too sure.
Fair, sounds fair. Niharika, what do you think?
I would think that I'm creative in certain situations. I think it really depends on what situation I find myself in. There's some times where I think I'm being creative and other places where I feel I can be more creative. And as far as whether it can be taught, I think that's a tough one as well for me. I'm not too sure at the moment. I think that I feel like school is a great place to create the atmosphere to encourage creativity. That's what I personally believe. I don't know if that goes under teaching, but I definitely think that it can be like an atmosphere, like you can encourage, instead of just going for the right answer or telling students how to do something, maybe encouraging them to think outside the box and letting them know that it's okay to think of different answers. And yeah.
All right, thank you. Madeline.
As usual, I would like to see the question reframed.
Yeah, she does this every year. She does this every year. Yes, tell us how.
Because I think my feeling about it is, look, you know, if most of you have had babies and children, that's why you're here. So everybody knows that children are incredibly creative if curiosity is the precursor to creativity. So like, none of us have ever sat down, and their thirst to learn drives them. So none of us have ever had to sit down with a child and say a year-and-a-half-old child and say, you know, I need to have a talk with you because it's time for you to learn how to speak. I mean, we don't do that because they're driven to do it. So I think the question is not so much whether it can be taught, is how we can stop pummeling it out of kids when they're in school. I think if you, thank you. I'll stop there.
Yeah, stop while you're ahead. Yeah, Tony.
Just a quick observation. My concern is that we put creativity in a box, particularly as kids get to middle and high school, and that box is called the art room, and only a very few people are allowed in there, or the music studio, or whatever it is. In other words, we have this idea that creativity only happens in a few places with a few people. And so we don't think about asking a really good question as a creative act, or having a divergent point of view, or an out-of-the-box idea as a creative act. I think there's an enormous amount of creativity that can go on if we were to encourage it and to expand our definitions of creativity and not assume it's just for those talented few in those special rooms.
So the thing that worries me is that the Caesars of this world don't think that you know, Caesar said he doesn't think he's creative. And this is a kid who sought us out for his senior project. Right? You're allowed to pick whatever you want. He picks this topic. He finds us from doing his research. And not only does he decide to do a survey, we didn't tell him to do a survey, right? Not only does he decide to do that, but then he actually takes it further, presents to the vice principal, and then decides to write a letter to the superintendent of instruction. I mean, that's hugely creative.
Absolutely. Great example.
Thank you.
So can we ask him, why do you not consider yourself creative?
No. Well, it's just like how Dr. Wagner said. I've always been like, it's always been stereotyped as creativity as a box of art. So that I've never experienced creativity with classes such as history, or to a certain extent, or to a minimal extent. History, English, essays of course, but there always had to be a certain format. So creativity was always restricted in some way in other topics. Math, of course, you had to get the right answer, and you usually had to follow a formula as well. And I always found creativity to be very limited in all topics.
So now that Denise has pointed out this act of creative problem solving, do you see it any differently?
No pressure.
Yeah, it's just you and me in the office. I'm just
be honest, it's totally okay.
I'm optimistic, but
not there yet.
That's okay.
I would like to see it, and if it works, it works. Yeah.
And I think, just to throw something out there, that a student who's been through this many years of schooling can't imagine creativity in a humanities classroom, in a science classroom, when we talk to scientists and historians all the time, and the biggest part of their job is creative problem solving. If it is coming up with a research problem, coming up with a question to pursue, coming up with the methods how to solve it. And the problem in our schools, one problem in our schools, and I'm with Tony on this, is if you're doing the lab where you know that the water is supposed to turn blue at the end, it's not your question, it's not a legit question, and you don't get to find your own methods and discover what really happens to the water, and who cares anyway, right? So one of the things that we talk about in our book, I am going to make a shameless plug for the book, is how you can make those changes as a teacher and as a student advocate for those changes, which is we want students to pursue real questions in the classroom. We want to give them the freedom to design experiments the way they want to design it, kind of like you had the freedom your senior year, actually. But it's not a free-for-all. It's not, hey, kids, do whatever you want. And it doesn't even have to look like high-tech high with the fancy wheel. This is just, what do you want to find out more about? Let me help you as a coach and a scaffold get you there. Let's talk about what skills and content you need. But then, as Tony said, the motivation is there. Last word, Tony? You're good?
I'd like to ask Tony a question, and thank you, Nia. I thought she made such an interesting point when she said there's creativity, I'm more creative in some things and less creative in others. And that's kind of the way I think, like my kids used to come home and say so-and-so was smart, and I'd always say smart in what way? Mm-hmm. Do you think creativity, is like that as well, that one is just creative or one is creative more or less creative in under different kinds of circumstances?
That's a great question, and I haven't thought a lot about it, but my first sort of instinct is that both are true. I think, to some extent, talent and interest interact with creativity, right? Mm-hmm. So that you're more able, perhaps, to be somewhat creative in an area where you have real interest and perhaps some talent, but not necessarily. I think there's also, tremendous creativity and spontaneous humor, which is something that's completely different. Mm-hmm. And so I think, for me, part of what creativity is, it's a freshness. It's a freshness of a way of looking at the world and a spontaneity in interacting with the world. Mm-hmm. So it can be a kind of premeditated or developed creativity in an area of talent or interest, but it can also be entirely spontaneous and a part of your sort of stance in the world. Okay. But what do you think?
I think if I'm interested in something, I'm more likely to be asking questions and be creative. If I'm not interested in it, then I'm probably less likely to use that.
So. All right, I think we are ready for our next question. Now, this is going to get a little bit harder, so get ready. All right, here we go. This is called selective elective. I'm going to read it for you. Your 10th grade son has a very full academic load and is on the football team. He is required to take an elective fall semester. He really wants to take art, but you want him to take an academic elective, such as computer programming or another science, because you think it will serve him better in the long run. What do you do? So I'm going to read it again. Think about this, and think about what the parent should do. Okay, your 10th grade son has a very full academic load and is on the football team. He's required to take an elective fall semester. He really wants to take art, but you want him to take an academic elective, such as computer programming or another science, because you think it will serve him better in the long run. What do you do? All right, here are the answers that we are giving you to choose from. You might not like them, but these are the answers that you have to choose from, okay? 1, let him take the art elective. If you believe that, you're going to type in let take, L-E-T-T-A-K-E. 2, insist that he take a more academic elective. If you believe that, you're going to type in A-C-E-L-E-C-T, ACELECT. A-C-E-L-E-C-T. Watch the autocorrect because that's not a real word. Okay. 3, have him take the academic elective in school and the art after school. That's do both, D-O-B-O-T-H. So students, what do you think that the parents should make the kid do? Parents, what do you think parents should do? Educators, what do you think the parent should do? Let him take the art elective, insist that he take a more academic elective, or have him take the academic elective in school and the art after school. We'll give you some time to type in your answers. Okay. Look at the screen and see. I don't know if you can see Caesar. All right, so we have overwhelmingly convinced you by our talking tonight, I think. So we have a bunch of people who think we should let them take art. And we have a very small group that says make them take the academic elective, but small but vocal. And then we have a large group of green of the students who are going to try and do both, and a slightly larger group at the parent level to do both, and the teachers not so much. So I have a question. So one, I don't know how honest people are actually being, which is so funny because it's anonymous, right? But let's just say that this is a converted crowd, okay? What we technically tend to see is many more parents who really believe that the football players should not take art, that the football players should take computer science because in the long run it's going to serve him better. So let's do some talking. Let's do some talking.
Maybe we've really helped the parents and they don't feel that way anymore.
But congratulations, we've done a great job. Thank you. Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah, we can go home. Okay, Niharika, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I just, the question is pretty long, but I know one word that really stood out to me was better. And I just was wondering, because better is a very subjective word, so who is it better for in the long run? That's what I thought of, because if the student is genuinely interested in taking art and he already has a full academic load, maybe art is an okay option. And I also considered the third option, which is, try to take both. But then I realized it said full academic load, and then how much time would the student have if you're putting another academic course in the school schedule and then on top of that art outside?
And football.
Yeah, and football, which is probably after school practice. There's not a lot of free time for the student or time to sleep, I bet, and that's so important for health. And I think free time is also really important to have the opportunity to, reflect in your life. And I just think that it's, better is like, for who, and I think that there should be a conversation about it. Yeah.
It's a great question. Better for whom? Better for whom? That's a great question. You want to weigh in, Tony?
I'll be a little bit outrageous.
Go for it.
Maybe he should quit football. And I'm actually half serious for several reasons. In Europe, no sports are sponsored by schools. They're entirely supported by municipalities. You're in school for two reasons: to take classes and to do clubs, especially in Finland. Because the whole point of school is to learn and to explore interests and possibilities. And the European view is that sports don't belong in school. They belong after school for lots of folks, and that's fine. But I'm quite serious. I do think that sometimes an inordinate amount of time is spent, particularly on varsity sports, at the expense of many other opportunities for one to develop interests and skills.
So I'll play devil's advocate back and say some of the things that you were talking about: collaboration,
absolutely,
teamwork,
right,
spontaneity, creativity, come from athletics. So.
And my return is, first of all, I speak as someone who's active every day and played football, wrestling, and lacrosse throughout high school and hated them.
Oh.
I discovered why when I was 30. I discovered that I really didn't enjoy running over people very much. And I took up tennis and I loved it. So part of the point here is that I really think we talk about well-being. It is much more to the well-being to encourage intramural sports and sports that are likely to be lifelong sports. And I think the amount of money consumed by some of these sports like football is outrageous. And for what? You know, is that kid going to play football forever? No.
And I just want to point out that when we work with Challenge Success schools, we often find that their high school sports programs are in violation of NCAA college requirements. So you're only allowed a certain amount of hours per week as a college student to train and be in the weight room. And we have many high schools that have their kids training 6 days a week before school, after school, over Thanksgiving vacation, et cetera. So one thing to keep in mind in the audience is how much is too much? What are the benefits? Right. And I think it goes back to Niharika's question of, you know, better for whom and who's doing the deciding. Madeline, you want to weigh in?
No, not really. I mean, anybody in the audience knows my point of view. I think that, you know, what comes up in a question like this is what's the separation and what's the intrinsic motivation and who's calling the shots? Like, why is a parent or when your child is, how old is this one, 10th grade? 10th grade. So he's 15 or 16 years old. That child should be, that young person should be making a decision about the classes that he wants to take. And I mean, I think one of the things that's so troubling is this, like, that children become the way we judge ourselves. And I had a woman stand up very tentatively recently and just say to me, I get your stuff about pulling back a little bit and looking at the whole, but how will I know I'm a good mother if not by my child's grades? Well, but I think she speaks for a lot of people when she only thinks that that part of her child is what reflects on her. And can I tell one quick story?
A quick story,
please,
yes.
Denise, yeah,
you
quick
can.
story.
I love that she asked me now. That's years of practice. She used to not ask.
I'm in the middle here.
I know, totally. Go ahead, Madeline.
So here's a case that I want to make about how you judge yourself vis-a-vis your children, because my kids are grown up. And my youngest son is working in a bank, and he's been there for 2 years. He's going to go back to school, and he gets a bonus. And he comes back, and I don't hear anything about the bonus. So maybe 2 weeks later, I say to him, Jeremy, whatever happened to that bonus you were going to get? Did you get it? And he says, yes. And I said, well, what happened to it? And he said, I donated it. And I said, well, you didn't tell me anything about it. Who'd you donate it to and how come? And he said, I donated it to Ronald McDonald. And he just looked at me and he said, Ma, it's the right thing to do. Now what matters so much about that, because I'm older than you, is that at the end of the day, that is what will matter to you about your child. I promise you, that was the best moment of my life as a mother, and it will be your best moment too. So I feel that strongly.
I want to hear from Caesar because I didn't ask you to weigh in. So football, art elective, academic elective, what are your thoughts here?
So to me, it seems just from reading that paragraph that the son is very responsible. He's very academically involved and he has a lot of responsibilities. So the answer was really simple to me when I first read it. I decided, hey, he should take the art because if that's going to be of interest to him, it can also spark creativity and can also alleviate stress. So he deserves it.
Nice one to end on. Thank you. Thank you, Caesar. Okay, we're going to give you another one. Please be honest, okay? I don't know how else to say it. Just really be honest on this, okay? All right. School of Rock. You have an 11th grade daughter who is passionate about music and guitar. She's in a band and occasionally gets paid gigs. 11th grade daughter, passionate about music and guitar, in a band, occasionally gets paid gigs. Her grades are just okay, and you think they'd be better if she spent less time with the band. What should you do? I'm going to read it again. You have an 11th grade daughter who is passionate about music and guitar. She's in a band and occasionally gets paid gigs. Her grades are just okay, and you think they'd be better if she spent less time with the band. What should you do? These are your limited options. Do nothing. If you want do nothing, you're going to type in not act, N-O-T-A-C-T. Do nothing, not act. Limit band practice time so she can focus more on school. If you do this, you're going to type in limit. Have a conversation about getting her grades up so her options are not limited. Grade talk, G-R-A-D-E-T-A-L-K. Or make her quit the band until her grades improve. And that's make quit, M-A-K-E-Q-U-I-T. So do nothing, not act. Limit band practice so she can focus more on school is limit. Have a conversation about getting her grades up so her options are not limited is grade talk. Make her quit the band until her grades improve, make quit. Go ahead and type in your answers now. So let me, for those of you who can't see, I'm gonna tell you what I'm seeing here. Okay, thank you, because it looks like you are actually gonna be honest on this one. So the do nothing is a very small percentage, and same with limit the band practice, okay? The have a conversation about getting her grades up, so her options aren't limited, was the clear winner here. And very few people would make her quit the band. So the thing that's fascinating to me is have the conversation about getting her grades up so her options aren't limited. I think people took that as sort of the easy answer. So I want folks to weigh in here. Caesar, let's start with you this time. What did you think that they should have done?
Thank you. So I'm actually kind of torn between limit band practice time and have a conversation. Because have a conversation about grades is very vague. It can actually result in any of the other any of the other options. If you have a talk with her about grades, it can end up being really aggressive, and she might end up quitting on her own, or you might make her quit, and so on. And there might be negotiation of how much time she should spend on the band practices. And well, obviously, I think that it's pretty obvious that there should be a conversation about grades. However, I am kind of supporting the limiting band practice until the grades improve as well, because there should be some restrictions so she knows where she is at.
Okay,
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Niharika, I'm gonna let you weigh in before Madeline and Tony.
Okay, I actually was thinking about the third option, having a conversation, and I would say Caesar brought up a great point about the conversation and what it can lead to. When I read that phrase, I was thinking more along the lines of there should be communication, I believe, between the parent and the student, but I feel like the communication should be a balance. I think that it's pretty impressive that at 11th grade, clearly she's not just having a passion, but she's actually, actively pursuing it. She's getting paid to do this, which I think is actually pretty impressive at that age. So it shows that she's committed, and it shows that she actually is talented. There's proof, right? She's really pursuing this. At the same time, I feel like I don't think from the parent's perspective, it's wrong to let the child know that they're, not to limit her options, that to have a bigger range, and maybe grades might help that option. So I think that the conversation should, I personally, if I were in the girl's position, I guess I would say that, the parent should acknowledge that, she's been doing really well, and that, hey, let her know that she shouldn't limit her options, and maybe, with grades, and then kind of leave it at that. So the child, at least, maybe if they didn't realize before, now they're at an awareness, maybe they just realized, oh, there's other options out there, and maybe I'm limiting myself. So there's this opportunity to really think about the future versus just leaving it or making her quit, because I don't think those are very desirable options. I think that the communication is.
Okay, Madeline.
So we knew these questions ahead of time, and I can't tell you who, but I happen to know one of the greatest guitar players in the country, And this is what he wrote to me when I wrote to him this question. He shall remain anonymous, but you would know him. He says, "Are you kidding? Are those the only options? Take an interest in her passion and ask her about the band. Talk to her about it. What does she love about it? God bless her."
I love that. Good for you. Good for you to do that. You know, I think parenting is often a leap of faith. And I'll illustrate it with one of those stories that came from my interviews for Creating Innovators, the book. I interviewed the Tellerman family. Now, Shanna Tellerman, from the age of 7, her only passion was art. Now, her parents were both in the medical field. They did not draw stick figures. They were terrified. They thought, oh my God, she'll never earn a living. But they never said that. What they did instead was convert a spare bedroom into an artist studio for her. So she goes all through school, and she muddles along in school, not terrible, not great, but all the while doing her artwork. So she applies to all these name brand schools and of course doesn't get into any of them. She's crushed. She goes through Carnegie Mellon, brings her artist portfolio, is accepted on the spot. Well, now what? Here she is, still doesn't know what she wants to do except art. Well, suddenly a convergence of things, a teacher plus 9/11. She starts a business using simulation for training of first responders, firefighters and the like. All through college and graduate school, she's struggling along with this business in the worst economy in 2 decades. And along comes Autodesk and buys the entire company and all their 15 employees, and she becomes, at the age of 28, a senior executive at Autodesk. Who would have figured? Who would have? Those parents believed in their child first and foremost. That was a leap of faith. I think ultimately good parenting demands many leaps of faith like that.
So I want to unpack this question a little bit because there's a lot of parts of this question that drive me crazy, okay? Her grades are just okay. She is not failing. Right. She is not getting straight A's. What does okay mean to a kid versus a parent, right? What does just okay mean? Tony started his whole talk by telling you that the credential society is not going to lead you to where you need to go, to where we all need to go. And we are all bought in to this notion of have a conversation to get the grades up. Nobody was really, well, there was a small group of orange people who decided to be brave and not act and allow the kid to follow the passion. But there could have been an answer that said, you know, embrace it wholeheartedly and, you know, start helping her promote the band or things like that, which is, you know, kind of what you're saying. This notion of your grades are just okay turning into, oh my gosh, we've got to have a talk and get the grades up is ludicrous, right, in that sense. Now, here's the pushback. Prefrontal cortex is not fully formed in adolescence. Not fully formed until when you're a man, 20, no, older. I thought it was like 28.
58.
58, Tony.
Still working on that, a little rocky.
So let's just, it's safe to say not fully formed until you're out of college for both men and women. Okay, so what is the parent's role? Go back to the other scenario. Kid wants to do football, Annie wants to do art. The compromise is to take the academic elective and take the art after school and football. If we let kids choose and their prefrontal cortexes are not fully formed, that's the little part of their brain that is supposed to stop the train wreck ahead. How much freedom should we let teenagers have over choices like, gosh, is she going to ruin her life if she goes whole hog into this band, or if he overloads? How much choice are we allowed to give the kids? Real question.
Great question. Great question.
Yeah, my take on that is we give the kids as much opportunity to exercise efficacy as is safe to give them. So
what does that mean?
So you allow kids to make as many decisions about their life that don't endanger them. So when your kid first learns to drive at 16 and they've got a decade of further prefrontal cortex development. You let them go around the block, you let them go to school, you do not let them go to Tahoe the first time, because what part of the teenage brain is missing is not the ability to understand that there are consequences. They grossly underestimate the risk of consequences. So from my point of view as an adolescent therapist, what you're always watching for is situations in which underestimating risk puts the kid, underestimating risk puts the kid at risk.
Right.
So in something like, do they take an art class or a computer programming class, I see that as a great opportunity. I mean, in making those decisions, they're practicing. It's practice. Anything we get better at is practice. So it's not a safety issue. And so I think our job is to let them make as many of those decisions, have as much practice with feedback and discussion as they can. And to pay attention to those issues where risk is likely to be underestimated.
I'd add a friendly amendment, if I could. Sure. And it really, the tip comes from your guitar player's email. What did he say, or she?
He.
He said, yeah, I think
no
you already
names,
said
no
he.
Names.
He said, ask her about go to a band concert. Ask her what it means to her. In other words, the point is to be in conversation with your child. You can't come to these crossroads without previously not had any conversations. You can't do risk assessment with your child without there being in the context of always being in conversation. And to me that comes back to, how are you spending time at the dinner table? Are you having dinner together? Are you kind of routinely talking about life? I think that's so much of what parenting an adolescent is about. It's not about setting rules, but it's about being in conversation, being available when they have questions.
So someone might argue that grades that are just okay is actually putting her at risk. That doors will be closed. I hear this all the time. Doors will be closed because she's not taking AP US history and she's not getting the grades that she needs to get because she's spending so much time with the band. What do you say? Kids, what do you say? Do you buy this?
At this point, it's so complex.
You're like, I don't even know.
I'd rather just listen.
Okay. Go for it.
Let me just offer a data point here.
Yep.
First of all, if you want to get your child into a name brand college, you better move to North Dakota and back to your Native American reservation and discover the cure for cancer.
Right.
I mean, seriously, the odds are so long for so many kids trying to get into some kind of name brand school, the costs are too high. There are right now today 850 colleges and universities that require no APs, no SATs for admissions. 850. Bates, Bowdoin, Colby, Carleton, Middlebury, Mount Holyoke, really good selective schools. The cost for getting into the few, the odds are so long, the cost so high, it's not worth it. So when we say she's getting okay grades, what is she throwing away? That she's not going to Harvard? Well, she wasn't going anyway, frankly. You know, I mean, really, guys.
And it wouldn't be a good fit for her to go there.
Yeah, because her band's not there.
Exactly. Did you want to weigh in, Niharika?
What was the question?
Is she, because you said you think that they should have the conversation about grades. You talked about grades as being important. So I'm kind of throwing that back to you. If she is a talented, passionate musician, her grades are okay, she's not failing, she will pass and graduate high school, but she's not going to get into a top college, and she's okay with that, what do you advise the parents?
Okay. Well, I would say that I feel like grades are important, but they're not everything. I think that if she is okay with not going into the top university, because in the end, that doesn't define anything, right? It doesn't mean like you're immediately gonna get a job, as you mentioned, and it doesn't exactly it doesn't finalize anything really. And I feel like if she's okay with it, because in the end, if you force her to limit band practice, that I feel creates this child to not want to come to you for communicating about her future, because she feels that you're not supportive. And I think that that's really, damaging in the end, and I don't think that any parent would want their child to not tell them about their future. I think that I guess I should if I would rephrase that, then I would say maybe not about like a heavy conversation about her grades, but mainly about her future and what she sees, as I'm kind of pulling from the other answers. But yeah, really taking the opportunity to hear her point of view, and then that way the child's more open to hear the parent's point of view so that they have an actual conversation. And I think that that's really beneficial because that happens in my family, and like we have conversations about this, and I think that for me it's really been beneficial because I know that now I've been, my eyes have been open to other possibilities, but at the same time, I know that my parents are supportive of what I want to do, so I'm able to still go to them if I have any questions, when I think that's really important, so yeah.
It's a great lesson for parents, and I want to sort of wrap this up by saying a little mantra that we have at Challenge Success, and Tony hit on it in his talk when he was talking about play and passion and purpose. So we have a mnemonic aid called PDF, and some of you have heard this before. So it doesn't stand for Portable Document Format. Hello, Silicon Valley. It stands for playtime, downtime, and family time. And what we did at Challenge Success is we looked at the research around protective factors for kids. Protective factors are factors that in the long run will help to ensure healthy development. And they kind of fall in these three categories, and Niharika's point gets to this, that one is play, and this is what this kid loves to do. And obviously in the other elective, you got to figure out what does this kid really love to do, and if he hates football, get him out of there. And if he's just doing football because dad is a football player and dad's life is around football, get him out of there. And if he wants to take art, let him take art and follow his passion and let her play, right? But they need time for play every day. Free, unstructured, not adult-driven, free, unstructured play in the classroom, outside of the classroom. And everything we said here kind of leads to that. The D is downtime, and that's the sleep. And there's no way that football player who has a heavy academic load, who's going to take art and take the after school, or take computer science and art after school, there's no way that kid is going to get the 9 hours of sleep that he needs. You heard from Caesar's study that the average, and his study matched our study that we've done with 40,000 students, that the average is about 6 hours of sleep, and adolescents need 9. Some people would say over 9. And they need time to reflect. They need downtime to chill and tinker at a piano and read for pleasure and ask questions and figure out what they're curious about. And then the last one, Tony and Niharika both alluded to, and Madeline, which is family time, which is one of the most important protective factors, is time to listen to your student, to really let your student know that you care about them, you love them unconditionally, and to spend time together as a family. The research says it should be 5 times a week, 25 minutes duration. You don't have to have that stop. I was only thinking if that stopwatch at the very beginning of this night was about family dinner and time that for 25, how great that would be. But the conversations that go on, where your kid looks you in the eye and says, because it's the right thing to do, Ma, right? Where you're talking about what do you love about music and how can we help support you. And the conversation gets away from grades and do this and get to the next step because, and I'm borrowing this from Madeline, we know that success is not a straight line from point A to point B. We know that it's going to be curvy and squiggly and messy, and you can't possibly know if this kid is going to end up as the guy on Madeline's phone or if this kid is going to end up a BA barista, but either way, she's going to have her music and her passion. She's going to have parents who love and understand her. She's going to have had that time to develop and tinker. And in the long, long run, not when they're 18, not what college, not grades, in the long run, when they're adults, when they're older, we are after the healthy, happy, engaged, purposeful, passionate person who has the skills we need for the future. And that's a whole lot more than can they do the quadratic equation and how well did they do on this stupid test where you fill in bubbles. It's about collaboration, communication. It's about understanding the need to give back to others. It's play and passion and purpose. It's everything you've heard tonight.
Can I say one more
yes,
thing? As
Madeline.
Usual. So, you know, in a lot of this is some evidence of the terror that people have about being average. And in spite of Thomas Friedman's average is over, which is like not possible because average can't be over, here's the reality. Like often I'll start a talk by saying, your kid's not going to Harvard. None of you. Your kid's not going to Harvard or Stanford or any of those places. And it's like, oh yeah, my kid is. Maybe I'm wrong. But the majority of kids are average. We're average. Oh, dead quiet now.
Raise their anxiety level.
The majority of kids are going to get average grades, go to average, State University of New York at Buffalo. They're going to go to average schools, they're going to get average grades. We're average in some things, we're extraordinary in other things. And so that's just part of being human, is being uneven and ordinary in many, many ways. We're lucky if we're really good at a few things. And so all this hysteria, has anybody in all the years we're doing this said, you know, I know my kid can do better, is what we get all the time. Nobody ever says my kid's a C student and that's right. And nobody, because apparently nobody has an average child in all of Palo Alto.
So
that's it.
I think, I mean, you heard the points tonight, right? So embrace the average now. Embrace health and well-being. And as you keep the big picture in mind, I'm just going to kind of end with a couple of final notes. We are going to be emailing you a survey because we want to know, how did you like tonight? Was this useful? Should we do it again year after year? Oh my gosh, back on the stage. We rely on your feedback and we take it seriously. So you're going to get that, and we'd love to hear from you. Anyone who is here tonight who bought a ticket, and anyone who you know who is live streaming out there, thank you for helping us to underwrite tonight's program. You will all have access to the full recording of tonight, and we'll send you the link as soon as it is ready. If you haven't already done so, we want you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and join our community. We have a new and improved, really awesome website, thanks to Samantha Spielman and Tim and a whole bunch of others, with lots of resources on how to help build in these strategies for communicating with your kid and finding time for PDF and making schools more engaging. Thank you to the Stanford Bookstore. We actually have our book and Tony's books and Madeline's books, so we'll all be out signing afterwards and can sign and answer some questions for those who want to stay. If you want to make a donation to help us with that $75,000 challenge grant, we have envelopes available at the registration table, or you can go online and donate there. And for Stanford employees, we have Be Well Berry forms. Don't worry if you don't know what that is. If you're a Stanford employee, you know what that is. Those are in the back. School teams. You get to go home, get some rest, and we will see you bright and early at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning in Cubberley for a conference. And finally, I just want to thank everybody on the panel, off the panel, for joining us tonight. Each of you takes a positive step toward well-being. Thank you. Thank you for helping to make a difference in this world. We appreciate your passion and your purpose. Have a great night.